The title of my talk changed a little by the time it got in the program. It's basically about 7 habits of people implementing XML beyond tech pubs. So it's XML and publishing and information reuse is our business, but outside of tech pubs for normal people who use Microsoft Word and not products like Oxygen or XMetal. I come at this industry as a business person. I ran a company called Information Mapping, which was a training consulting company that commercialized an academic's research into structured writing. And in the late 80s, there was a format associated with what we did, and macros were available to pre-format documents. Before that, people used a Selectric typewriter and hit the tab key. And all of a sudden, there were all sorts of products that could take macros. Back in the, I'm going to say, mid-90s, 1993 or so, Lucent was one of our biggest customers. And it had spun off from AT&T. And Lucent could make, they made switches, PBXs. If you ordered they say they had 200 flavors of PBXs. If you ordered flavor number 62, whatever, they could make it in a month and a half. And they would sit that thing in a warehouse for 1 to 3 months while they wrote custom documentation. So somebody recognized that flavor 62 and 104 and 20 all had mostly the same information. You know, what are we doing here? So at that time, we hooked up with a company called ArborText, whose editor has been passed around a little bit. And we developed chunked information tagged with SGML, Standard Generalized Markup Language. And that's sort of the big granddaddy of markup, SGML. And at that point, I thought SGML was going to really make me rich because we had structured information. SGML needed structured information. But the techies took over SGML, and it really got relegated only to high-end publishing. So then HTML became the markup language of the web. And HTML would let somebody say, well, it's going to be green or it's going to be over here on the screen, but not much more than that. And now XML, which is a superset of HTML and a subset of SGML, has come along and is really the standard for marking up any kind of structured content for reuse, for multi-channel publishing. Now, we created an output at Information Mapping to XML. Nobody seemed to care. After the company got purchased by some Europeans, I got into the DITA world. DITA is a markup structure, sort of the next generation after DocBook to let companies easily reuse information. Our bet and our target and our belief is that structured information has to move out of tech pubs to the organization at large. That most organizations have hundreds or even thousands or tens of thousands of people who could contribute to a corporate effort, but there need to be some standards involved. So if you're technical, this might help with the rest of the organization, but these are some thoughts on what will make multi-channel publishing and information reuse with XML work outside of the very technical functions. And as we've implemented, there's no rhyme or reason to which industry this works in. We've seen, though, 7 habits that lead to success. And they're broken into 3 categories: management, information architecture, and process improvement. So the 7 habits are: you have to manage it, You have to adopt topic-based writing. You need to adopt a writing standard. You need to practice good writing. And then you need to separate the authoring from the publishing. Focus on business and not technology, including the words you use to implement this stuff. And finally, keeping it simple. Okay, so the information age is still with us. We're still loaded with information, not necessarily paper anymore. The amount of information available, as we've heard through this conference, expands, and there's really no end in sight. Consumer products are often judged by content or information, whether it be grocery articles or your kids' toys or something you're buying at Sears. You look at the information around the product. The use of information to judge commercial products is even more prevalent. And sometimes information really is the product. What we write, how we write it, really matters in terms of people buying your products. It's how we judge things, whether it's on paper or an online kind of inquiry. And the new buzzword of all of this is user experience. What good is information and content unless it actually improves the user experience? And I use the word user broadly, not just a product user, but somebody who uses your written content. So sometimes information is a product and people now expect it in their local language. Certainly English, Spanish, Chinese. We're seeing some companies that need to deliver their messages in 30 or 40 different languages. And the message isn't just the technical documentation or the training materials. It's the product sheets. It's the policies and procedures. It's proposals. So people now expect it in their native language. And the technical groups have been the pioneers here. And this is good news and it's bad news. They've discovered if you mark up content, you can reuse it. And the markup is sometimes even more important than the content itself is. And there have been some tools to help people manage it. Word processing systems have emerged that let people write in XML. Tools to add metadata and attributes to different pieces of content at almost any level. The TechPubs groups have learned to write in topics rather than one big long document. And whether they start writing as a document and see that there are chunks within the document, or they start writing in chunks of a document and assemble them into something bigger, doesn't really matter. But the days of long string-on manuals without access points and without being chunked are really long gone. So as a result of TechPubs doing this, reuse has increased. Organizations can publish to paper, online, PDF with the same source material. And in the technical areas, even with an extra layer of staff to use these XML editors and to convert documents to XML, the payoff has been great. The biggest payoff has come from reusing translated pieces of information. But other things happen along the way. The brand improves because of consistency. So something big is happening, but what about the rest of the organization? How do we get similar benefits outside of TechPubs? Well, customers want their product sheets in their local languages. Customers want just the information they want off of the website or off of their PDA or iPhone. I know there's nothing more frustrating to me than seeing a PDF come through on my iPhone, as, well, we're going to serve everybody's needs. I just don't open them, and I'm sure most people don't as well. Organizations can save money if training people can leverage the work that was done in tech docs. Tech docs can save money if the SMEs who contribute can do so in a standard form that doesn't have to be rewritten or reworked in any way. Sales departments can use this new publishing and authoring paradigm to improve proposals, reuse pieces of information in proposals. And what you're starting to see is very customized communication used for customers. And that really improves the marketing brand as well. So why doesn't everybody just do this? It's because the tools are tough. The enterprise needs a simple way to implement XML. That it's XML outside of TechPubs isn't about 500 different DITA elements or DocBook elements and learning the nuances of that. Most people outside of TechPubs write paragraphs, they put labels in, they've got tables they reuse, they have a hierarchy in their document, and it's not all that complex. It might have some images in there. So you can't afford, first of all, to hire that extra layer to redo content coming from somewhere else. Workflows outside of TechPubs or outside of a compliance area are generally pretty simple. People write or edit, they review, and they publish. They don't need 12 layers of a workflow. The other big issue is that most people outside of TechPubs use Microsoft Word. And Word is good news and Word is bad news. Word is good news. People love it because they can do anything in the world with Word. But that doesn't lend to a standard. It doesn't lend itself to reusable information. People using Word spend an inordinate amount of time doing desktop publishing. And what looks good to me desktop published doesn't look good to you, so you change it, or you use a different format, and you use a different one, and you use a different one, and there's no consistency across the brand. So this unrestrained flexibility of Word really can kill a standards implementation. So the hope and brilliance of what marked up content could be and standards can get derailed by the realities of an organization. Authors sometimes say that they don't want to be constrained, that you're going to ruin my creativity. Adding technical layers to a company increases cost, and there are thousands and thousands of pages in most organizations that need to be converted to a standard structure. So, you can just give up right there, or you can think about a simple and realistic approach to moving modern publishing and authoring outside of TechPubs. So we've seen 7 habits of XML implementers that work outside of TechPubs. So the first category is management. You got to manage the process. For change to be successful, you have to deal with all the levels of the organization. Senior levels control the purse strings. They can turn the project on and off at will. They've got to understand where you're trying to go with modern publishing techniques across the organization. The management needs to be informed of what you're doing. There definitely needs to be some sort of a line manager who's a sponsor of the project. But in the course of getting people to change, we all know that some people change easily and some people don't. And that's a reason to have management on top of things, so that if you get that person who is not going to change, but the organization is going to change, you can deal with it. So management and senior management need to be on the team. And then there are enterprise writers and publishers. I think the difference here compared to tech pubs is that people creating content outside of tech pubs generally have a job to do, and it's not technology related. Technology is incidental to the performance of the job rather than technology being the job itself. So if you tell someone who writes compliance information that they've got to learn 200 data elements and start using oxygen, they're going to tell you to go away. But these people can take advantage of the technology, of a common shared repository, of simple workflows, of tagging information and content with metadata. This is where the world is going, and not just big companies, from what we can see. There's a clear return on investment from information reuse, from translation of course, from consistency of the brand, desktop publishing, separating publishing from the creation of content, and then finally from getting the writers out of silos. So you got to have management on your side, you got to have the senior people on your side, and you got to have the people doing the work on your side, and it's got to be managed. The second grouping is information architecture, and the first is to adopt a writing standard. You familiar with, ever heard of like DocBook or S1000D? These things are DITA. DITA is the up-and-comer. All of a sudden there are 500 DITA elements. There were 2,000 DocBook elements. S1000D has a gazillion little nuances. Some people need all of that, but other people need a much simpler writing standard, or only a piece of the more complicated one is probably a better way to do it. So to adopt the writing standard, it's got to meet the needs of lots of different people. First of all, the writing standard needs to meet the needs of the information consumer, the person who's going to read the information once it gets published. It needs to meet the needs, I'm one slide behind, of the writers themselves and the publishing function. And all of a sudden, publishing is going to get separated somewhat from the construction of content. So information consumers, it's pretty simple. They just want the right information at the right time, in the right way. Writers need to understand the architecture, but they've got jobs to do as well, and the job isn't just understanding the technology. It's just using the technology to reach a goal. And publishing functions have often been way ahead of the organization, so the people publishing manuals, training materials, fact sheets have very sophisticated back-end publishing, but getting that information and the content into a form to be published that way is often an expensive process. So the architecture needs to meet the needs of all these people. The standard you should think about what level of information reuse is realistic. We often see people take a look at Alfresco. One of our partners is Companize. They have a DITA, set of really powerful DITA utilities on top of Alfresco. And sometimes people look at it and they think, oh, I can reuse anything. I can reuse sentences. I can reuse, columns in a table. And it's like, okay, so technically you can do that, but who's going to manage it? What are the administrative costs and overhead costs associated with that level of reuse? So we say basically a topic should stand on its own and start by reusing topics and have some reusable little things like fragments or common tables, that sort of thing. But don't get down to the sentence or paragraph level, which is totally technically possible. But start looking at that across the organization, and the overhead of administering it becomes prohibitive. So as the level of granularity increases, the level of overhead, goes up significantly. So you need to think about types of information. There are actually a whole bunch. Back up. Of whether there are structures in your business that are important. Back in information mapping, there were 7. There were procedures, which were how to do something. Somebody did it to accomplish a goal. Processes. Processes describe how things change or transform over time. Principles, which are rules. Facts. These chairs are sort of orange. Concepts, which is basically knowledge. And then structures and classifications. DITA has 4. It has a basic topic that stands on its own, and then the first 3 levels of specialization are a task, like a procedure, how to do something, a concept, which is knowledge information, and a reference, which is basically access to usually tabular information, product codes, that sort of thing. David Merrill, back years ago, had 4 kinds of information. And what's useful is to think about these kinds of information from the point of view of what you want people to actually accomplish. When you jumble together all your procedures and processes and knowledge information, you give people too much and they won't read it, so they guess. You don't hear much at these conferences about the actual quality of the content itself, other than it needing to be chunked and needing to be available in multiple media. But the actual usefulness of the content is really important as well. So an important goal is also consistency. Consistency on many levels. Not just making it look the same, but making it behave the same. So if the authors are sharing the same information standard, the information fits together better, sort of like Lego blocks. And then organizations, as opposed to information types, sometimes just use templates of a certain style. So you might have a strategic plan or operating guidelines or how to do a fact sheet. If you could give people the structure to fill in a way that they could generate XML on the back end, you end up implementing an information standard easily. And people don't need to know that it's DITA or DocBook or what it is on the back end. They need to know they're creating a policy or a procedure, and here's what you have to do before you implement the procedures. Then there's a whole issue of legacy content and conversion. You've got all this hodgepodge of stuff out there. When we started in this business of going from Microsoft Word to XML, I really thought, you had to calculate ROIs, but we find that like 75% of our customers, they just want to get control of Microsoft Word. If you can give me control of Microsoft Word so I don't have to do any cleanup on the way to publishing, that's going to save a ton of money. We're dealing with a big software company now. They publish millions of pages of training a year. It's all written in Microsoft Word. They send it to India, and every piece of paper that they send, every page is re-entered into Oxygen. It's like, holy mackerel, how crazy is that? But it's worth it on the other end because they're publishing millions of pages of training material every year. So you got to look at your legacy content. What we tend to see is that some of it can be reused, but maybe not as much as you think on the way in. Some of it can be reused if it's edited and changed, but a whole bunch of it isn't any good at all. It's everything the writer knew, not everything a reader needs. So how are these things controlled? They're controlled by things called either DTDs, document type descriptors, or schemas, which are sets of rules. And the rules can be enforced for the writer. So there are a lot available. We talked about DITA, NLM, which is in the scientific research area, National Library of Medicine it stands for. DocBook, S1000D for the defense industry. A lot of people just use custom schemas. So you need to begin your journey to XML with a clear understanding of your content, where it is today, where it's going to be tomorrow. And often the actual implementation of the standard can be a lot lighter and easier outside of tech pubs. But how great if the underlying XML architecture was the same so that SMEs can contribute in. So that's information. Oops. Okay, so the third shift is to topic-based writing. All right, so what do we mean by topic-based writing? I can mix you a drink, and the drink's going to have you got to get a glass to put it in. I need some mixers, I need some fruit, I need some liquor maybe, and all that goes together and I make a gimlet. But, so when you look at the bartender makes a gimlet at a time, but maybe that's not the right way to organize your content. Maybe the shift should be, instead of it being the end product drink, maybe one person is going to focus on the fruit and another on the mixers and another on the liquor. So you're shifting from an orientation on the big document or the big thing to something, less. This same focus can be applied to writing. Content ownership can change. So instead of this person owning this manual and this person owning this manual for these products and this manual for these products, it shifts all around. Maybe somebody's going to own a different subset of the total view. And I do believe that people need a view of the end product. They have to have some idea where the content they're creating is going. But a lot of times these days you don't know where it's going to end up. If you do this thing right, people are going to find ways to use your topics in ways you never imagined. So topics can be reused in multiple documents, and it's important for that to be at the right level. And I used to think that the shift to topic-based writing was complete, like everybody's going to write topics. But now we see some people have trouble with that concept, learning how to write that way. And if you think of a good end-user manual, it's actually ends up being topics anyway. So how you get there might be less important than the fact that all of a sudden your end document has some hierarchy associated with it and has topics that can be accessed discretely, where each one can stand on its own. Okay, the third thing. I don't know if you read, in the last week somebody came out and said the biggest flaw in our school systems across the country is writing skills and communication skills, and that's certainly true. But, you know, I used to in a big room, I'd ask the people, well, how many of you think you're lousy writers? And nobody would raise their hand. But you ask them, how many of you think the other people you work with are lousy writers? And all the hands go up. Well, why is that? It's because, you know, people have one view of what good writing is, and another has another view. So back when, at Information Mapping, when I was in the structuring content business, I had this talk I used to give saying, the problem ain't grammar, and I'd misspell grammar. It's the organization of content. But now it's actually both. Everybody judges you by what they see on that page or on that screen, and not only does it have to be well organized, it's got to be good grammar, or all of a sudden people are going to light up the web in your customer line with or tweets about your company. So everybody judges not just your content you write, but they judge you by your, you know, ability to put communication together in a reasonable way. So once you've nailed the basic architecture of information and the writing standard, it's important to write well in, you know, decent sentences appropriate to your reader. So you've got to consider the multiple potential audiences and who needs, you know, a huge amount of this information on a topic and who might just need a little bit. Okay, so good writing, spelling, advantage, style guides can help. Okay, now into the third group, which are the process improvements. So the first process improvement is to separate authoring from publishing. It's going to get resisted. A lot of people actually like doing their own formats on their documents. But this whole issue of what looks good to me and everybody else can be widely varying. So companies need to have some standards on their publishing to reinforce their brand and consistency. So you've got to separate it. You can improve your image. Publishing can be appropriate. Once it's in XML, it's easy to format it for a screen or for a PDF or for an iPhone. So, and this is clearly true for translation, where there's a stage in the middle of somebody writes it, usually in English, but if it's written in another language, generally the second place it goes is English, and then to all the other languages of the world. The next process thing is to focus on the business, not technology. You know, we see, you know, tech pubs jumping out ahead with XML, and they actually believe the rest of the organization wants the same level of technical knowledge and skills that they have. And nobody gives a darn. They don't want that. They want to do their jobs better. So as you implement this thing, you know, like we see it with DITA. We see the DITA courses. They teach 200 elements of DITA to some end user. I was like, I don't want to know that. And in fact, if I don't start applying it right away, I'm going to need another course 2 weeks from now when I pick it up. Or if I only write a real big structured document once a quarter, I don't want to relearn a tool like XMetal. I use Microsoft Word. So you need to hide the technology, and we've seen organizations even have prizes given to people who can do this without saying what it is. You know, don't say XML, don't say DITA, don't say DocBook. All you're really doing is creating different structures of content that have more meaning than what people are used to. And then the last one, keeping it simple, smart person. And I'll say we've been using this for 2 years, so Alfresco just caught up with the smart, simple thing. But it is so true. The simpler you can make an implementation like this, the more likely it is to succeed. We see these initiatives try to move out of tech pubs, and the tech pubs people are just thrilled with the savings they've gotten and how they've been able to improve publishing. Say, yeah, we're going to change this whole organization. Here's your new editor. It's going to be ArborText. And people that use Word look at that and they say, just go away. So you have to focus on the business side, take advantage of technology. There's a reason why we use technology. Look where it has put us. But in most of the organization, technology is incidental rather than primary to the goal. Your authors use Microsoft Word. Let them use Word. There are ways to automatically get to XML from Microsoft Word. And just because something's technically possible doesn't mean you should do it. We've seen initiatives where outside of tech pubs, they call 12 departments together and say, everybody make your wish list because we got to buy a content management system to support this. And the wish list is so long that nobody can meet it, or it's going to cost millions of dollars. You can start simply with Alfresco. It's really a great tool, sort of. I think of it now as like SharePoint on steroids. There's a lot more you can do with Alfresco than you can do easily with SharePoint. So keep it simple, keep your workflows simple, but put in a workflow. Most organizations do that now in a manual way anyway. If they're creating a compliance documentation, sometimes it's got to go off to legal. But there's a review cycle, there's published content. These are the tools and processes of modern authoring and publishing. So you get your return on investment from reuse, saving significant time and money, all the way from authoring to translating. The consistency you get builds a better brand rather than everybody just writing in their own styles. You remove desktop publishing from every author, and the estimates are that most authors spend 15 to 30% of their time just formatting documents. You improve your customer satisfaction through the better brand and better information. You get them just the information they want at just the right time in chunks sometimes rather than whole documents. And the translation thing is clear. If you translate to 3 languages, you got to use this. So back to review, you're going to manage the process, adopt a writing standard, shift to topic-based writing. Remember what good writing is. Separate authoring from publishing. Focus on the business, not the technical. Keep it simple. Okay, so where do you start? Start anywhere. You don't have to do the whole organization at once. We've seen small tech pub groups adopt XML, training organizations that often reuse content, marketing groups for product information, and whether the proposals are written in marketing or sales, depending on the industry you're in, reusing different chunks of information in proposals in a managed way is a lot better than what happens now with proposals, which is generally they pull one out of the closet and edit the whole proposal, and you get what the person pulled out of the closet as the base rather than what your organization wants. We've seen authors in SAS, the statistical company, they write books. We took a look at their Word documents, and when they were published, they all looked the same, but every single author wrote in a different way. And in the middle was a whole bunch of human resources making it the same so it could be published with a good look and feel. We've got a big oil company using it for compliance information. These are people that wouldn't touch XMetal or ArborText. So our message is you can start small, start in a part of the organization. It's going to be nice and easy. Keep it simple, and you'll be successful. Don't let it die of its own weight. This is going to happen, whether it happens in the next couple of years in your organization or 5 years from now. There is going to be an information standard on the back end, and it's going to be XML based. So I'm happy to take any questions you have, or any comments. I saw a lot of nodding heads, not too many. Go ahead. Oh, that's right.
I know to wait for the microphone.
Okay.
So we still have to figure out where we know each other from.
Yeah, I know.
As I mentioned before you started, the organization I'm in has actually been doing XML content and publishing and moved to DITA for probably close to 10 years now. And actually, you're spot on stylistic things. I mean, for example, in certain organizations, we focus on like the Chicago Manual of Style. This is the way you're going to write content.
Yeah.
Covers everything. This is, serial commas, the whole 9 yards. But we've also found, and so most of our content is not tech journals, it's educational content. These are our courses. Most of our benefits have not been from reuse, but from instead multi-channel publishing, where we can take that same content, publish it out as a print book, PDF, online, whatever. The reuse that we have used has been primarily, again, being in education, on the order of test questions. Assessments, which are really easy to reuse because they're very small, very discrete, topics, this, that. We've actually found from the standpoint of writing educational content, you can't necessarily just lift a lesson talking about triangles in geometry and move it somewhere else. It just doesn't really work. But
You use DITA. Do you use a training specialization?
yes.
It's complicated.
Well, actually, learning and training specialization, and we've also done our own customization for things like our media elements.
How many of the 500 elements of DITA do you think your people actually use?
Well,
Just
they're
take a
all
guess.
in the schema now.
Right, they're all in the schema. How many do people really use?
And how much do they just use because this is the way, it's a group of, it's this and this. I would say probably 50.
50%. I think that's high, but
No, 50 elements.
Oh, 50 elements out of 500, 10%.
Yeah.
Okay, that's more like it.
No, like 50, not 50%.
That's how people work. You can only keep a few things in that head.
Well, we do a lot, because we do things with code fragments and things like that. So they, a lot of it, they say, oh, I want to plop in a paragraph. Well, here it is.
Yeah.
Anyways, it wasn't so much a question as was.
Yeah, it changes your world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Anybody else? Over here. Oh, or over there.
I've been following the uptake of XML in the publishing industry and how incredibly slow it's been, and why it certainly suits technical publishing way more than a lot of other formats. When it comes to which sort of vocabulary should we select, is it DITA, is it DocBook 5.1, is it our homegrown one, these debates. And even if they do select a standard one, they can't resist the temptation of extending the schema anyway and losing the benefits of tooling. There's a growing trend to the realization that HTML as a kind of an XML format is becoming a more acceptable alternative because it's now much more semantically defined with HTML5.
HTML5, right.
Very, very limited semantics, but still it's far more semantic at the block level structure. And with the advent of microdata, you can actually add a huge amount of meaning.
Yeah.
Perhaps not structure, but meaning to
Right. There are like 30 different things you can add to an regular HTML document. I think the organizations we see going that way are purely focused on the web and not on paper. It's very hard to go from HTML backwards to paper. But there are organizations that the web is good enough. That's
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know whether you've seen this, but I start to see, but because of that weakness you just identified there, that HTML5 is not enough, so they externally describe what's lacking using, for example, RDF or other external structures.
we would say go to the common base of XML that then produces the HTML5 and PDF and mobile, and you get a richer set of possibilities. Okay.
Hello, I'm Lelia from Alfresco. I work in training, Lelia Livadas, and I do actually use data.
I'm hearing impaired, so I have to watch your lips
I
go.
actually do use data, and I watched your presentation with great interest because I was hoping that at the end you may be offering a solution. We know data is difficult,
Yeah.
but we know that something like data is needed actually in order to produce multi-channel type of publications. So do you see anything on the horizon in order to...
That's what our product does, but I'm not
Yes.
allowed to talk about our product, but I will now. It's a Word to XML authoring environment driven by schemas, and our whole focus is the end user who uses Word who won't use something else. So we can spend a few minutes. It's totally controls. We have to take full control of Microsoft Word and what the user interface deep inside Word. So the author sees Word, but everything in the background is XML.
You were mentioning earlier about the fact that in data you have to categorize your information elements into tasks, into references, and also concepts. So how can you embed that in Word without actually adding a subset of XML in Word itself?
Yeah, the writer only has to know, first of all, SAS that I talked about, they even just did a topic and did a map. So you basically write a topic, it's a chapter, and it gets assembled into a map structurally. And then everything else in the background that's data is totally hidden from the writer. The writer is just picking a paragraph or a heading, that sort of thing, off of a menu. Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. Thanks for coming. Yeah.